This is Inkwell. Also known as Hanbuel O, Inkwell's been put into a pretty interesting situation. Without him, I wouldn't be making this video. At the time of this recording, it's 2025, but our story actually goes back quite a bit further. Let's jump back to 2006, one of the golden ages of MapleStory. A young Inkwell is currently attending University. He's hired on at Nexon HQ, and it doesn't take long before he starts making waves. Inkwell was promoted quickly, becoming part manager in 2008, and a program team leader by 2009. He stood apart from his peers by doing things like creating the lie detector item, something that was pivotal for early hack and macro prevention, amongst other things. It didn't really take long for Nexon to take notice of this. By the young age of 25, Inkwell was promoted to be MapleStory's 4th director. There's an interesting wiki page where I'm getting a lot of this information from, and I think they put it pretty clearly. While his peers were just graduating from college or looking for jobs, he became an executive of one of the largest companies in South Korea. Not bad, Inkwell. Not bad at all. A young, spry Inkwell was willing to make some serious changes at MapleStory, notably being the one that led the Big Bang update. An update that was very controversial over time, but overall was considered needed for the game's progression. Doing things like changing the entire world map, changing the leveling progression speeds, as well as refining the Black Mage story into what it is today. However, as I mentioned, this patch was controversial, and arguably the most controversial part of this update is that it also brought along the cubing system. The Big Bang update releases in 2010 in GMS, and cubes were put in shortly thereafter, around July 21st, 2010. Shortly after, MapleStory has quite a few successful years in terms of revenue. I believe these numbers are global, however the trend can be applied worldwide. By 2013, MapleStory had made $326 million just that year. However, some of the cracks were starting to show. There was a pretty steady decline of $240 million in 2014, $253 million in 2015, and then a measly $83 million in 2016. The following year did manage to rebound to $279 million, and while it's purely speculation, I think that there might be a trend related to cubes that could correlate to this. If you were to ask players these days what their opinion of cubes are, especially in the West, in general, you'll get the sentiment that they're terrible. Again, in a speculative manner, to me it seems like cubes, bonus potential, inner abilities, flames and nebulites in the West, as well as things like royal hairstyles and other RNG cash shop systems, are probably a large reason for why there was such a large spike in MapleStory revenue. But then why was 2016 such a low number? The creation of the Reboot server. Reboot releases somewhere near the end of June 2015 in Korea, which meant that GMS got it in early December of 2015. At this point in time, GMS was basically a dumpster fire. The game already had Magnus, as well as the Root Abyss bosses, and in 2015, GMS also received Lotus. These are some tough bosses to overcome, and in the game, pay to win was rampant. Cubes were a major part of this, seldomly given out for free. Main pot and bonus pot was almost impossible to overcome unless you were willing to spend a lot of money on it. The Star Force system was introduced somewhere around 2014, but players had already been using things like Guardian Scrolls for years up until this point. The pay-to-win aspects were just getting to be too much. With the release of Reboot server, the game gained new life in the West. Things like mastery books, cubes, flames, inventory slot expansions, character slots, hyper-teleport rocks, buff freezers, and even more things that I'm probably forgetting about were all made completely free. Effectively, the release of Reboot, the only things that you were expected to spend money on were a pet and some cosmetics.
Useful items are only obtainable through gameplay, and are not available in the cash shop. The only way they can be bought is with Mesos, the in-game earned currency.
Players in the West rightfully rejoiced, but Remember what I was mentioning about revenue before? It seems possible that the release of this in both Korea and in GMS is what caused 2016 to be such a weak year in terms of profits. Not only that, but at the same time, GMS especially was still being completely rolled by hackers. Maybe it's just coincidence, maybe it's not, but in August of 2016, Nexon hit the oh shit button with the release of Frenzy Totem. If you play MapleStory recently, you've absolutely heard of this item. And it didn't stop there. Around that time, there were other things introduced, like pay-to-win totems, Battleroid, and the Outlaw Heart. Surely these things juiced GMS's income for quite a while, but at what cost? Nearly a decade later, GMS is still struggling to overcome these balance issues and trying to rebuild their interactive server. If Reboot's so popular in the West, why not lean into that, and maybe even just ignore or get rid of the interactive servers? Well, everything seemed to be going pretty smooth until Korea decided to announce the Dreamer update in January of 2024. Of course, shrouded in controversy as always is Nexon, and in Korea they freshly came off a situation where they were caught manipulating RNG rates.
They fucked up. They fucked up big time over here, man. Okay, let's take a look at what's going on. Today, the Fair Trade Commission determined that random items from MapleStory and another game which is called Bubble Fighter was suspected of violating the Electronic Commerce Act and announced the impose of a fine on Nexon. Do you know how much the fine was? 11.6 billion won, my guy. This is the highest fine, the largest ever for e-commerce law. MapleStory self-disclosed the probability of the cube items. After the probability was disclosed, the Fair Trade Commission conducted an investigation as problems will arise about the fact that the certain potential options such as boss did not appear. And they're deliberately trying to avoid telling the players that this is being changed over here. They hide it. Any tickets coming in, they actually try to delay it and try to hide it over there as well. They put it at the highest maximum security and it must be hidden from the players.
With this, they opted for a handful of adjustments, one of those adjustments being no longer selling NX cubes. This brought up one question. What are they going to do about the Reboot server, where cubes are not sold for NX? Amongst other alleged reasons, they decided to go for the bright idea of delete the fucking Reboot server. There was an onslaught of controversial points brought about with the Dreamer update, but I think the deletion of Reboot is really what instigates the whole purpose of this video. As GMS players waited nearly 4 months to get an update about their awaited demise of the Reboot server, they finally got a very unexpected message from somebody they hadn't seen in some time. Inkwell's first note hits GMS, and it's announcing that he'll be spearheading the development of GMS. Along with that, GMS will be taking its own path that does not need to be necessarily in line with what Korea does. Not only this, but snuck into that note, he confirms that GMS will not be getting a cap to the amount of mesos we can accumulate. The cubing system will be remaining the same, and with this, Reboot is here to stay. As a second server is introduced, Reboot worlds are now referred to as heroic servers, and their counterpart, interactive servers. Both will be developed in tandem, and they're going to be trying their best to give us quality of life updates. The player base rightfully goes bananas.
Wait, what is this? Oh, hello, Maples. What the? Hold. What the? Oh my god. Oh,
they're localizing GMS? Damn. Reboot is saved, but Ursa still remains.
But this is really good news. Holy moly.
I think this is a great step in solidifying MapleStory in the West and finally giving us the players a direction and vision that has been missing from the game for a while.
Inkwell! You know we rocking the Inkwell hat! If you ain't rocking this hat, you a f***ing...
In a moment of some of the best news we've ever received, it's also alongside some of the best transparency we've seen in a long time. MapleStory players are back at it, happy as a clam. They know it'll be some time before we hear from Inkwell again, but they can rest assured that the server is saved for now. This was great. The bulk of the GMS player base was happy. However, interactive server players still had a few questions. What did this mean for their server? How was it going to operate? How was it going to differ from Korea?
Where are the bonus cubes, bro? My guy, who is using sharing tags? Where's the bonus cubes? Is that so much to ask for 5 bonus cubes a month? Why does nobody play the server? Because you can't even throw people who farm reward points or get reward points from pay to win 5 bonus cubes a month?
About a month and a half later, a second Inkwell note hits the website. Already praised as some sort of messiah, Inkwell's second note delivers. This time, primarily focused on interactive server. It addresses trade-restricted items that are negatively impacting us. It addresses population issues and the possibility of a world merge. But most importantly, it addresses the topic that nobody in GMS seems to want to ever bring up: the Frenzy Totem. There's nothing concrete, but he tells us that they're working on a plan and trying to figure out how to solve this issue. Along with a handful of quality of life and some free goodies for both servers, Inkwell informs us that what was formerly the Dreamer patch is now going to be changed to something different. The player base will just have to wait and see what happens at the start of the summer update. The Go West patch drops in June of 2024. There's nothing crazy included in this, but we get a good taste of what Inkwell has planned. Inkwell has followed through on his promise to keep heroic servers as they are, and both servers are getting some goodies, GMS exclusive. The players are a little disappointed that they didn't get any more unique updates from Inkwell, but they're also understanding that not too much can happen in 1 month. Players enjoy their summer update, and by September, we get another note. Featuring probably the most anticipated topic at the forefront, an update on the Frenzy Totem. There's plans to introduce a new totem into the game in a future patch. Most of the information that he shares points towards the winter update being the big patch to keep an eye out for. Once Maplefest comes along, the players are informed that our winter patch will also have a new name, the Dark Ride. Featuring the new boss Limbo, it also introduces the GMS exclusive event that's been hyped up. Ride or Die is introduced, and it's a boss rush. Players are also getting excited because it's announced that the totem that was mentioned before can be obtained for free through the Ride or Die event. Now, I don't want to be too dramatic. There were a lot of good things that were brought along from Go West as well as with the Ride or Die patch. However, the start of the Ride or Die patch was a bit of a shit show, to say the least. There were a lot of bugs, a lot of maintenance. I mean, overall it was pretty well received. There was good custom content, very high quality animations, some unique ideas, and it's a glimpse of what GMS exclusive content can be. But there's still a lot of problems with this. The event, at least an interactive server, is largely meant to address totems, and the game being very top-heavy. Because of the way that the boss rush is designed, it's easiest for endgame players to get the maximum rewards and thus the highest amount of chances at getting a new totem. A lot of these endgame players are not the ones that really needed these totems. Newer players tend to be the ones that struggle the most and would benefit the most from this. If you're someone who's strong, the event is easy and it's boring. If you're somebody who's weak, the event is very hard and time-consuming and potentially has little payout. Not only this, but my primary concern is that this is an event. The totem introduced here is not a permanent fix. Now, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and think that maybe this is just a trial run. It seems possible that they're just trying to test how the totems will work, see how they'll impact the economy, and then potentially look to implement a permanent fix later. The part I draw an issue with is, whatever that permanent fix is, it cannot be top-heavy like this if they actually want new players or returning players to come back to interactive servers. It has to be something that everybody has equal access to. Otherwise, all it's going to do is cause more frustration and bring about the same divide that was already in the player base. For that matter, why would heroic players leave if it means that they're going to have to struggle for months, maybe even a year before they could get something that would allow them to train at the same rates as other players? Along with this, there has been no indication about future changes or what's going to happen after Ride or Die so far. Okay, you might have seen it on screen before, but technically that's not exactly true. Inkwell did release a small note at the end of February, which indicated that they were planning on bringing these back, but there really wasn't much concrete. It says that they're still reviewing it. Along with this, there's been a slow rollout of other content that players seem to be actually more concerned with. Which brings me to my final point in all of this. It honestly just feels like they're missing the big picture. As far as my sentiment, as well as what I've seen online, it seems like players largely just want a MapleStory that is stable and has some good quality of life improvements regularly being added. Obviously, certain things can only be introduced by the Korean branch, but I think that especially for things that are overseas or GMS exclusive, those quality of life improvements should be coming a lot faster. In a similar vein, players largely just want the game to be more stable. They want less bugs, not more of them. The Ride or Die patch had so many bugs at the start of it that it really just was hit or miss whether or not you were going to be punished for just playing the game. Obviously, I'm not speaking for the entire community, but I feel like a lot of people would agree with me when they say that they would easily trade off a unique and GMS exclusive event simply for stability and having more quality of life introduced. On top of this, the things that the players actually care about feel like they're being almost outright ignored or just trickled to us for no reason. For example, I personally would be willing to scrap the entire Ride or Die event if there was just more transparency on things like what they plan to do with familiars, what the cadence is going to look like for rolling out the rest of the Grandis regions, as well as why the blue familiar cards suddenly went missing from the shop, and whether or not they're going to be introducing more of those, why they haven't introduced red familiar cards to heroic servers. Maybe Nexon wants to avoid controversy, so whatever, that's fine. My point is, I think that the GMS team should probably focus on things that are already in the game aside from maybe the Frenzy Totem situation. If their first priority was learning how to implement good quality of life for GMS exclusive content, it would mean that other regions also would benefit from that quality of life, but more importantly, they would be more familiar with how to release stable and high quality content. That way, when they want to make some of these events in the future, they actually feel good. Not only this, but the GMS player base would actually be more happy. They'd be delighted to see these bug fixes and quality of life introduced over a one-time event. It seems like the GMS team is being forced to work too hard on things that just aren't important. It's possible that from a player perspective these things are obvious and that the GMS team doesn't really know exactly what it is that we want. So here's a small list of things that are non-game balance affecting that I think should be prioritized over any type of new contents or events. Trust me when I say I do have plenty of game balance related suggestions as well, but if they're looking for things that don't necessarily need to be verified first because they could impact game balance, I think that these things would be ideal. First up, the familiar system. Reduce the animation times for familiar upgrades. Inform us the rest of the Grandis release schedule and put a priority on it if possible. Add familiars to the preset list that already exists. Prevent familiars from despawning in certain areas like the Ride or Die map, Limbo, Ranmaru entrance, and Ardent Mill. When players are trying to register familiar badges, allow them to click on the mob and have it show the location on the map where that mob is. Add back at least the old blue familiar cards that were existing. I mean, it would be great if there were more, and just in general, it'd be great if the user interface for familiars wasn't so clunky and weird and hard to manage. For totems, some very easy ones should be to add totems to equipment presets, as well as allowing us to compare them to other totems by using the middle mouse button, similar to how rings work. Bonus points if we can get the default totem comparison to be the one on the bottom, just like rings are, instead of the top, how it is currently. Next up, the housing system. It would be great if they would make it so that we don't change channels whenever we're entering or leaving the housing system. I think this is particularly important because you can get both boss buffs as well as EXP buffs. It's kind of a pain to have to remember the channel that you're in beforehand so you can go back to that channel after you leave your house. If they have those buffs in there, they might as well just let you stay on the same channel. In kind of a similar vein, let players stay in their house when they log out and back in. It's kind of a weird feeling to have a housing system, but you can't actually treat it like a house. And lastly, one of my personal favorites would be adding in cool and unique items that can be purchased from the cash shop for the housing system. The housing system has so much potential that feels wasted. They're looking for additional ways to make money. There's one right on their plate, and the only thing they could think of was to add slot expansions to the cash shop. It doesn't make sense. You could do so much with this. Players would be totally happy with spending a bunch of money if you could do like a cool king slime cushion or something that you could spend a few bucks on. The sky is basically the limit with the housing system in terms of aesthetics, and I feel like it's severely underutilized. Similarly, the guild hall. I think that the guild hall has an equal amount of potential. You could also introduce unique and cool NX items that any guild member or guild leader or whatever can purchase and put into the guild hall. It's wild to me that they didn't see an opportunity here. Not only this, but Nexon wants ways for the game to feel more alive and community interactive. The guild hall would be a great example of this if it was easier to get to other guilds' guild halls. Look at the cool, unique items that they have. If there was like a good hub world where you could go between different guilds' halls and they'd have like, their emblem on like a crest in the front, something like that. I don't know. It feels, again, like so much wasted potential for something that is such high quality content. Along with this, please, for the love of God, make the drop rate for Breath of the Artisan at least slightly higher. It doesn't make any sense for these things to have an equal drop rate percentage to pitch drops. You finish like one blueprint every 6 months. It's terrible. Moving on, for things like Golix, you could easily introduce quality of life, such as reducing the animation times, reducing the number of weird cutscenes that are happening in there, just in general making the UI for Golix improved, as well as introducing a practice mode. The practice system has been out for a long time, and it is wild that we just decided Golix does not need a practice mode. It doesn't make any sense. Get rid of the key system. It's just bad. One of the last but more important topics is related to overseas classes. They really need to put a high priority on making it so that these classes are not constantly bugged. Kana's getting banned, Hayato's being DC'd from using their skills, Hayato's animation cancels changing seemingly every year or so. The list goes on. Lastly, and I can't believe this even needs to be said, but they have to make sure that all of these jobs, including Lin, have their jobs updated at the same time as the KMS classes. We've seen instances where, for example, Beast Tamer did not get their 6th job for like 6 months after every other class already had 6th job. On top of that, when they finally got it, the compensation was pitiful. It was not even close to what they could have gathered in that time. And in the end, if they really want some permanent and cool GMS exclusive content to work on, just fix and add more things to the Masteria region. For example, Masteria doesn't even really work right now. Elite mobs don't spawn in Masteria, which means that you can't complete the dailies. I submitted a ticket about this like months ago. They said they passed it along, nothing has happened, it's probably not going to be fixed, but whatever. I guess I care about this other stuff more than that. So in summary, I think that the direction Inkwell is taking the game is good. I just think that it could be even better. They can do effectively what I see as less work to get more praise from the player base and make the game a better, more stable experience. I have even more ideas of things that they could add to the game in terms of actual game balance, as well as other ways that they could make money that are not intrusive and pay-to-win options that the West clearly does not like. If you guys are interested in that, let me know, and maybe I'll make another video. And hopefully it won't take me another year to actually get something put out. Also, I know there's a bunch of controversy right now for the Demon Slayer collaboration, as well as with UniCubes, things like that. I'm not going to cover it here, there's other videos out there already covering it. For anyone uninformed that just wants the quick and dirty, it's the same old Nexon. Oh, and if you have ideas for GMS exclusive quality of life or balance, definitely let me know in the comments. I'm always super curious what other people are thinking of. Okay, bye!